Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's John Ross with the XPian Daily News Report for 12/16, Wednesday, 12/16. It's hard to believe that this Advent season is coming around and Christmas is just, I guess, 9 days away. Just hard to believe. Today, we have a special guest with us from Wheaton College, Dr. Vincent Bacote. And Dr. Bacote is really just a blessing to have you with me. I thank you for taking this time today from your schedule to be with me. And Dr. Bacote is an associate professor of theology, and he's also the director of the Center of Applied Christian Ethics. And I think we'll touch a little on theology and ethics, and we'll do a few different things here. So, welcome, Dr. Vincent.
Good to be here. It's essentially a good break between all the grading and finals week.
Oh, that's good. That's good to get you away from something. I was going to say you can go home and with your family, but this is a little different.
Well, you may have heard the phrase that sometimes people say, when you're a professor, you teach for free and you get paid for grading and administration.
Okay. Okay.
So you kind of feel that in weeks like this.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're with me today here. And a few years ago, before the 2016 election, I don't know when it was, he's the author of a book of The Political Disciple, A Theology of Public Life. And I'm just going to show that book cover here in a second here for everybody. So there's that was in 2015, I believe, that book. So you're acquainted with topics of politics and in the church. So we really appreciate that type of thinking here. We're going to be talking a little more with Dr. Vincent on those topics. So there's a topic out there that I think it's a nice play on words called truth decay. I heard about it basically from President Obama's interview on 60 Minutes. And I talked to Dr. Vincent Gaddis of Benedictine University about this a few weeks ago, too. I know it's a broad topic, Dr. Vincent. What do you think about that? I believe there is a decay out there because we have called fake news, and I think it relates to the Christian realm quite well about truth. What's your thoughts on truth decay?
Here's the arc of history view and then the contemporary view. The arc of history view is that it's been a problem since Genesis 3, basically. So
that's true. That's true. That Satan guy he did a good job at truth decay there. Yes.
Yes. Right. Did God really say this? Right. So you have always the temptation to question the things that are good, true, beautiful, etc. And so that's not a new thing that the possibility of truth decay has been there, or truth rejection, honestly, or recasting truth in another form, right? I think in the contemporary context, a way to think about it is to say that we really are in a kind of postmodern reality. When I was a doctoral student in the late 90s, and when I was starting here at Wheaton about 20 years ago,
okay.
Postmodernity or postmodernism was, a lot of buzz about that, about whether that should be welcomed or not. And of course, postmodernism wasn't a single thing. But one of the things that came with it was versions of critiquing how we could talk about truth with any objectivity. And in a way, some of the critiques were welcome in the sense that it would encourage people who thought they were merely objective to pay attention to the fact that their context, their background, their interests, their biases might play a role in how they talk about something being true or real. In other words, that they weren't just being objectively reasonable. The flip side of it, though, is the ways that part of postmodernity was saying that people say it's ultra modernity. If modernity means, going back to Rene Descartes, when you make the individual person the arbiter of truth, I think, therefore I am. In other words, the autonomous, the self-ruling person, that's where truth lies, so to speak. Well, that's where the authority lies. Initially, the way that people get told the Enlightenment is that everybody has the same rationality just by being human. Postmodernity really radicalizes it in the sense of saying each individual person is their own reality, their own rationality, their own perception, etc. And I think this is where we are inhabiting a certain kind of postmodern moment, or dimensions of a postmodern moment, where truth for many people is determined less by some kind of pursuit of what's really the truth, and I just want to consider all the facts out there and evaluate them as best I can, and then say, okay, this seems to be true, as opposed to truth is determined by the people I choose to be the ones that are truth tellers. And so if my tribe tells the truth, then truth is determined by what happens in my tribe, not by anything external to my tribe. So my local truth becomes what's really true, which means that you basically get competing notions of what counts as truth. And so if we say, and I think a Christian should, that truth is actually objective in the sense that it comes from God, and God who's outside of us, then it's a decay of truth if truth is determined by your tribal loyalties rather than by your loyalty to God.
Yeah, I want to just briefly just put this on the screen. This is where it was a Rand book that came out in 2018, and there's the book called Truth, Decay. It's came out by Rand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got some of this thinking and talk about it. But it's always been out there. And like you said, the church has got to think on this. This also, I believe, what you say goes with history too, how we look at history, through what eyes we look at history. We don't want, I was thinking today, I was in a Bible study and and it was about the message of Stephen and how he told the Jewish people there what actually happened in the past. It wasn't actually a great history, and that got him in.
History of amnesia.
Yeah. He got himself in trouble there, and maybe he wanted that trouble. I'm not saying he spoke the truth. I'm just saying, doesn't history also show where we look at right now? Everybody's saying, oh, we're, about racism. We don't want to say that we're racist to America. We just don't want to go back to that history, but it's true there. And these type of things. What do you think about history, how we look at history? Doesn't that have some bearing on how we look at truth too?
Well, if your life is relatively comfortable, and if you're a Christian and you feel like you are open to God's work in your life, but you don't like getting too uncomfortable, then if you're able to have a narrative about history that doesn't make you have to confront ways in which you may have to have some a series of Damascus Road experiences.
Okay, right.
If you're not interested in that, or you know that that's going to be uncomfortable, then there's an inclination to say certain things that are true about being Christian and as a Christian who looks at history, but then you only look at selective dimensions of history, because if you look at more of the history, then you wind up being implicated. And I think it's important to say that this is a problem for everyone, because I think that it's like what I tell my students, that if you have a figure that you love to read about, and there's a certain version of that story,
right?
Well, first of all, no story is going to tell us every detail about that person's life, every episode, or
right,
every glory, every shame, right? But the fact is that if you really become an aficionado of any historical figure,
Right.
you're going to discover things that perhaps you wish you didn't discover when you were just
Okay.
kind of a
Right. Right.
fan who enjoyed important things that were good, but you then didn't have to deal with other things. So if you like George Whitefield, you have to account for the way that he regarded slavery, as in owning slaves, or Jonathan Edwards as in being a slave master. You can say, "Oh, I love Edwards."
Jefferson
It's
would
like,
be
well,
another one. Jefferson too. Thomas Jefferson.
yes. I mean, so it's any figure, but also if if you admire Martin Luther King, that's great, but you've got to talk about infidelity.
Right.
You have to talk about. I didn't know until Charles Marsh was talking about it when we had him here in 2008. About apparently he drank a lot. I mean, now on one hand, he may have drank a lot because this was a way of dealing with all the stress he was under, which immense. But the point is that you have to deal with the clay feet of any figure, and people don't want to deal with their own clay feet sometimes, much less the clay feet of people that they like. So there, so that makes it creates a hesitancy for looking at anything, much less history, whether it's history of the United States, history of a denomination, a history of a movement. So if somebody wants to talk about the history of this thing called evangelicalism,
Right.
um, lots of good things have happened in the history of evangelicalism, but not all good things.
Right.
So you have to talk about that. And if you're going to be honest about it, the point isn't to say because you discover some deficiency, therefore you now need to do the cancel culture thing and get rid of it. Because if you can play cancel culture and be an equal opportunity person, you basically cancel the whole human race, is what you do. Because there's no perfect person. There's no person that you can't find something if you get close enough where you go, you're out. So,
Yeah.
so I think we have to really have just the willingness to be truthful about what is there. And to the extent that being truthful about what is there leads us to have to confront things within ourselves, we even need to do the heart check and ask ourselves, if I'm unwilling to see that there are things I need to change,
Right.
what is it about me that is making me resistant to it? Because a lot of times when people want to only talk about certain narratives or engage in whataboutism, when they do that, sometimes I think the question is, what else are you saying here? Because you're not really talking about history. You're talking about yourself. So what are you saying about yourself in terms of your own refusal to confront what may be part of what's going on in your heart? And to me, at least when it comes to Christians, any Christian who claims that Jesus is Lord must really be willing to say, okay, then the Lord can say to me, can we talk about fill in the blank? And you had to say yes, and deal with it, right? And the point is, of course, recognize that when God says let's talk about it, it's not because God wants to hate on you, right? It's because God wants you to be more and more of a more fully realized human being rather than a person who has at least selective deceptions that they engage in.
Yeah. I was just bringing back about that Stephen story in Acts. And right at in Acts, no, I think it's Acts 8:1. It says Paul was holding the coats of the people around there, and I go, isn't that an accessory to a crime? And it was murder here. Uh,
Yes, yeah. Well, and Paul, I mean, he admits it, in letters. I mean, I think sometimes we think about, okay, Paul, you had this Damascus Road experience. You've got this great. You're the pioneer to the Gentiles, right? You're the 13th apostle, so to speak,
right,
and you call yourself the chief of sinners. And you talk about, what you were, all these things. And I think sometimes we go, but Paul, look at what, you're forgiven, etc. I think he knows he's forgiven, but he
right,
also wants to be honest about what he was.
right. I think he did that, and I think that's why that's thrown in there. It's just sort of like out of the blue in that section
Yeah,
that it says he's holding the coat. So
yeah.
at normal, I don't know about Jewish law on that, but I know our law would be that you probably would be that's pretty close to being in the crime thing.
He certainly after his conversion would be the first to tell you that he wasn't just accessory, he was the mastermind.
Yeah, right. What I'm saying, yeah, he's part of the murder plot here
Yeah,
of Stephen, and
yeah.
I don't know if he murdered others. I was trying to think on that one.
He certainly was trying to make it happen.
I know he was putting them in jail and doing a lot of bad things. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but anyway, I just thought that was that we don't sometimes look at history. You know, Moses would be the same way, and David would be the same way.
Sure.
You know, they have a rap sheet, as you could say.
You can
We
go,
all
yeah,
have some
yeah,
rap
yeah,
sheets, I guess, but some
yeah.
are a little different. And no, I think what Truth Decay doesn't really, I think you're right. It doesn't hit on the point of sin. It doesn't show us who we really are. We don't really want to see that, do we?
Well, generally people don't unless they decide that there's a particular self-improvement plan on which they want to embark, in which case they're happy to at least have certain problems highlighted because it's a part of an improvement plan that they have chosen. If
Right.
it's God's self-improvement plan, which of course may include a lot of things we did not choose, then we're likely to be exposed as to having things that we'd rather not. We'd rather be comfortable in our way of saying, "Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it." And God says, "Well, actually, it is broken. You've just jerry rigged it in a way that you think that something that doesn't run very efficiently you think is okay, rather than something that can run more efficiently, and it'll run a lot more efficiency if we do a little work here." And I think that's kind of a way to think about the tendency to resist it. Um, and the thing is that it makes me wonder about the extent to which churches help facilitate ways that people can grow like this. Not grow as in the sort of, hey, everybody admit that you're broken and fallen, etc. I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but once you've done that, the point about admitting that you're imperfect isn't to stay in your imperfection, right? I mean, it's to acknowledge that you have growth ahead of you.
Right. And you
Um,
just don't want to stay at that point
yeah,
of,
yeah,
no, you just don't want to stay at the point of admitting it. And I
right,
think we were talking about an author earlier. I think that's the critique of some churches, that we just admit we have racism, but what are we doing about it, or
right, right.
things like that. And I want to bring this up real quick. A few years ago, I was reading an article on, I think it was in Christianity Today, a Lifeway survey done about people who read the Bible,
Mhm.
and it said that those who read the Bible were generally more, I don't know, progressive, or I don't know, more thinking about hunger and other
Mhm.
issues, racism. And I go, that explains why people don't read the Bible somewhat. People don't, we don't want to read some of these things in the Bible that tells us, you know what I'm saying? And we don't want to hear the preacher tell us that too. It's
Right.
sort of,
Well, and if you think about it, I think sometimes the way some Christians in their formation, they basically only read parts of the New Testament because that's where most of their preaching comes from, and that's what
right.
most
Well,
of
I
them
can
care
go
about the
into
message.
that topic. We can go into that topic. I've noticed we don't talk much about the Gospels, but a lot about Paul. And
Right, right. Well, and even if people are talking about Jesus, they don't talk about the fact that he said, "I didn't come to abolish the law; I came to fulfill it." That that he's in continuity with the revelation that came before him, and of course that means if Jesus said that, then you have to do things like look at the book of Amos and look at all of the emphasis on justice, or really look throughout the minor prophets and all the ways that God is making it clear that it's not just about you having a personal disposition toward me that I care about. I care about you actually being committed to poverty and justice. Although, to be fair, you don't even need to go back there to do it. Just go to Matthew 25.
yeah, the
Because
Matthew 25 one is the kicker. Yeah, it's
yeah,
pretty
because
strong.
then you have to deal with the fact that basically the goats are the ones who did the antithesis of loving your neighbor as yourself, specifically expressed as ignoring the various needs of neighbors, right? In terms of poverty and clothing and people being in jail, etc. So um, those things that sometimes are that God's making accusations about Israel or other nations, those things are still showing up in the New Testament. It's just that the way that people are presented with it, they're presented with it as ways where they think it's only about what people do as individuals or not what groups of people do. Unless, of course, it's groups that they care about, in which case they're happy to talk about corporate or systemic sin. But aside from that, then talk about what individuals do. And also, if salvation is by grace and not by works, then you don't want to talk too much about works in a way that God like really cares about it, because then it sounds like you're trying to be saved by doing works or trying to save yourself by your participation in social justice, etc. And for sure, there might be people who have that temptation, but I don't think we're overrun with all these people who think that they are trying to have salvation by works by their commitment to justice.
Yeah, that Matthew 25 gets into people. We had some sermons on that last at my church. They sort of tried to pull that together with grace and works, and that 25 is pretty tough statements there.
It is. But basically, what all it's saying to a Jewish audience is, because that's the people he's talking to at that point, he's basically saying everything that God kept saying to them throughout the Old Testament about the kind of people they were supposed to be.
Right.
And if you act like covenant people, you're sheep. If you don't act like covenant people, you're a goat.
Okay.
It's none of those things ought to be surprising to any Jew, because those are the things that God tells people to do. And if you're not doing those things, then well, yeah, don't you strangely aren't like a covenant person.
Yeah, just what do you think about the current situation in our country? And we can also talk about the evangelicals too.
Sure.
Where do you think where we're going right now? We're in a transition here between two presidents. It looks, I think it's going to happen.
Looks like it's going to happen now for sure. Yes.
I think it's going to happen.
I mean, I think it was always going to happen. It's just a matter of kind of being drawn out. But we're in a most interesting moment. I think it's important, just for a little history, to point out that in 2000, the Supreme Court basically decided the election for George W. Bush.
Right.
There were a lot of Democrats throughout his administration that say, the first 4 years anyway, that basically say, you're not a legitimate president because the court delivered the White House to you. So you had Democrats doing that. And in 2016, there were at least some people who talked about the fact that because Hillary won the popular vote, and basically because they couldn't believe that Trump could have won, can we get electors to like cross over?
Yes.
And so in a way, what we're having now is just a Republican version. Well, I'm sorry, a particular Republican version. I want to say all Republicans are this way because it's really, I think, the dynamics are a little bit different. I'll mention that in a second. But you are having a magnified version of some of the dispositions that people had when you had other Republican presidents getting into office in 2000 and 2016.
Right.
It's much more magnified than that. And the reason it's magnified is because you've got essentially an uber narcissist as a president who has been very good at creating a context of loyalty to him, which is apparently how he did things in his businesses. And you create enough of a loyalist reality among the base,
right,
among Republicans, that as long as he wants to say that he is opposing things in some way, people are just inclined to believe it, and they don't want to risk losing re-election because of people who thought you weren't loyal. So you kind of get a kind of conspiracy of silence, or people saying, at least I want to show that I'm kind of loyal by saying, well, let the system run its course. Let's go with all the legal challenges. You repeat the language. Nobody says what they really think. You just repeat what's being said by the president and his lawyers. And so I think that's a magnification of the kind of thing from 2000, 2016. It's a magnification that you can get when you have a person that created a personality cult.
Right.
And I think this is also the sense, though, where some people have said about the Trump presidency that Trump may not be the president that people wanted, but he's the president that we deserved. because of a society creating a significant, uh, cults of personality around various kinds of celebrities. And so you do the same thing with a political figure, and a political figure who knows how to do television,
Right.
and a political figure who did for a lot of in a populist way what Sanders was doing for a lot with certain Democrats, telling people who thought that they were being ignored that somebody sees them and cares about them, and
Right.
having a way of appealing to them in certain ways. And so that you create a loyalty around that, and for some people, that's the tribe. So we go back to what I was saying earlier.
Well,
Then you want to be loyal to your leader until your leader says he's out. You don't want to you don't want to believe that
yeah.
there could be another reality.
Well, I think I hear you on some of that, but this leader is actually telling false statements, though. It's
Yes.
not.
Well,
It's not quite the same.
Was it a false
Some of
statement?
your other earlier statements about in 2020 and
Yes.
I mean 2000 and 2016, but because Trump said it was a bad election before it even became the election. I mean, he was.
Well, that's why I said it's a magnification. I'm not saying it's identical. The point I want to make, though, is if people are going to say nobody's done anything like this in terms of raising questions about the election,
No, they raised questions, but
other people have done that.
This is the highest I've ever seen on that. I know Democrats did raise that on in 2000, but it was nothing like this. I don't.
No. That's why I called it a magnification.
It is magnification. It totally is.
And why I said a person who is a very particular kind of narcissist. I mean, everybody who runs for president's gotta have some kind of ego, right? But I mean, people knew this about Trump before he ever, before 2016, before The Apprentice, people knew this about Donald Trump. So nobody should be surprised that somebody whose entire public positioning has been about how great he is, that if something is a defeat for somebody whose whole way of going about things is to prop up yourself as the greatest thing, why are you surprised in a way that this person is not going to go quietly? Now, I'm not saying that that's reasonable. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it kind of fits par for the course.
Okay. How do you think we're moving to we've had a lot of good conversation.
Yeah. Well, this is what always happens.
What do you think? I want to really, we'll sort of throw it to the end here. What do you think in the white? Well, I would use the word, I'm going to use white and put evangelical. Because I think there's black. I don't want to, that term evangelical has been used for white totally. I don't like to use it that way. I know my black Christians are evangelical, so I don't like the word being batted around the way it is. But I'm going to use the word white evangelical here.
Well, and even that's complicated because it's not even.
I can't say all either. That's But I'm just wondering how are we going to recover from this Trump period for these people? What's your thought just on that one?
I would say the church has recovered from all kinds of things. We recovered from the Crusades.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
My only point being,
that wasn't right. I don't know how long that took.
But, I know. Well, and you also didn't have social, the media machine that we have, right? My only point being that, and here's one way to put it, I guess, is that no Christian tradition is dependent upon the perfection and success of the people that inhabit the tradition. In other words, the trust has to be in God, not the people. So that's one part of it. I think it will take something like a coming out of a fog, or going to rehab, or detoxing, or a lot of things. But part of what also has to happen, honestly, is, in my view, not less political engagement, but better political engagement. Because I think what's happened with some people, and this isn't just white evangelicals, for a lot of people, and you've probably read a lot about this, part of the reason you get the fervor for a figure like Trump is because people are getting from their political commitments what they formerly would have gotten from a church type of situation, or and so the thing that gives them meaning and purpose,
Right.
and that they're getting that from their political commitments. And of course, that's very dangerous because that's idolatrous. And idols will always let you down. And the other thing is that, of course, idols also have a shelf life, or at least human ones do. So I think there has to be um, if you will, an awakening or a slow waking up, like coming out of being under anesthesia or something, is what has to happen. But I will say this, and I don't know where you know this or not. I had another publication come out a couple weeks ago. It's called "Reckoning with Race and Performing the Good News in Search of a Better Evangelical Theology." It's
Okay.
a very expensive book. It's with the publisher called Brill, a very academic publisher. So invite your librarian friends to purchase the book. And if you
Okay.
have a connection to that library, then you can get the book for $25. Uh, if you want to pay 4 times the price that you normally do, then please go ahead and buy it. But um,
This must be expensive. You
it
really
is it
do.
is expensive. It's one of those, one of those thin volumes. It's hardcover. And you're like, how's this book $100? Because libraries buy them. I mean, it's great, prestigious academic publisher, etc. That part's great.
So you're
But
going
I'd
to
like
have
the
it.
message.
You're going to have it at Wheaton College. You're saying?
They have it, yes,
Okay.
they
Good.
do have it.
I'll just have to come
Um,
up there and borrow.
but well, I mean, if you have borrowing privileges, you might be able to just access it online.
Yeah, through the systems. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But the reason I mentioned that is that part of what I propose in the book is that if the root word of evangelicalism is evangel, gospel, good news.
Right.
And so I mean, this has been the case really before 2016, and it still remains the case. Is the possibility for evangelicals to reacquaint themselves with what they purportedly believe about actually being confronted with the Bible we were talking about earlier, and confronted with the Bible in its totality. And I think one of the things that you can do with evangelicals is you can keep putting a Bible in front of them, and we can say, okay, you need to open it to more than one page because you said you believe all of it. So we need to help people see the other pages. That's part of it. But another thing that I think needs to happen is that people need to be willing to have their character interrogated in their engagement with Scripture, because the point about engagement with Scripture is not just validation of what you already believe, but it's your being open to God who is informing you and transforming you. And so there has to be a willingness to have an openness to not just saying, I believe this, but to say, I'm really exposed to it. In fact, here's a way that I talk about in the book. Carl F. H. Henry wrote this book that's well known because he wrote it, not because it was persuasive, called The Uneasy Conscience of Modern Fundamentalism. He wrote that in 1947. And so I take that uneasy conscience idea and basically say that what ought to be characteristic of evangelicals is having a perpetually uneasy conscience. If you have a perpetually uneasy conscience, it's uneasy because you know that at any time God can, through this word you say you're exposing yourself to, God can disturb you and show you that there's more for you to learn. There's more for you to know. And maybe there are significantly different things for you to do if you're going to really know him and be a disciple of Jesus, part of his church, and part of expressing through proclamation and practice, what it means to belong to God. So, are people willing for God to disturb them, or do they only want God to rubber stamp what they already affirm? If you say you believe this Bible, then you are saying you are willing for God to disturb you. You're saying you're willing to have the perpetually uneasy conscience. So people who are watching this, or if you're watching this, you have friends, encourage them to ask themselves, are you willing for God to make you uneasy?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's very good.
And so I think that is kind of what we need to have happen. Now, so I'm basically putting a vision out there of what needs to happen, I think, for the change to occur. Do I think it can happen? Well, here's the thing. I think actually it can happen because it needs to happen, though, by changing the conditions in which people engage a lot of these questions. People need to be engaging these things when other people aren't around. when it's not on social media, when they have time to sit and reflect and to not deflect and to not be defensive and to just say, okay, I want you to just be willing to sit with, who God is and what God might want from you, and not for God to just be someone who is that you can manipulate. That's called an idol. Or if Jesus is your Lord, are you willing to be under your Lord and to do what your Lord says, to see what your Lord wants you to see? Now, evangelicals of all people ought to be those people, and I think there are senses in which evangelicals really are willing to do that. And by evangelicals, I mean the people that are actually church-going people that read their Bibles, that pray, and do these kinds of things. Not people who, when asked when they were leaving a polling place, "Are you an evangelical?"
Right,
and they
right,
go,
right,
"Yeah, I'm one of them."
right.
So I mean, but I mean the people that are actually these church-going
You
people.
mean the people that really are in the trenches more? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and I also think, by the way, it does mean that you need to have uh, ways of forming people so that they are willing to be hearers of this, rather than people who get mad or who think that
Oh, that's
if you bring up race,
that's
then you're becoming one of these liberals or whatever. I mean, I think those people, if they are in churches and they're saying that, those people need to be able to hear and be formed in a way that inclines them to say, okay, I'm always saying I think they're a liberal or whatever. What am I really saying? Am I really saying that I really believe what God is teaching, or am I just conflating anything I disagree with something that makes me able to put it in a box and dismiss it? And again, if you're really talking about being God's people, not being part of some social, cultural, or political tribe, then that's what people need to be. But I think churches have to form people so that they are understanding that if you're part of this, you're really this person that is always open to God, not a person who tells God, I'll tell you when I'm open, because then you're the Lord and not him. So I think that's got to be a big part of what's going on in the formation. Otherwise, people are maybe showing up and they're in the pews, but really they're better disciples of something in the culture than they are of Jesus.
yeah. I think that I was thinking back again about Stephen there. Someone was in our study group said, well, there wasn't much gospel there about what he was talking about. And I go, no, he represented the gospel the way he acted. And it was talking about he looked like an angel on his face. And
Right.
he did miracles too and everything. I mean, uh,
And in
and
that particular context, he basically is telling Jewish people their entire history of God doing great things for them having amnesia, or them resisting it, and then he calls the question by saying, and now Jesus has arrived. Okay, there's your gospel right
and
there.
you're doing the same thing.
Right, exactly. And now Jesus has arrived, and you're doing what you did with the prophets.
And they got him mad and they grit their
Exactly.
teeth.
Yeah.
And
So if someone says, I don't see the gospel presented there, it's like, well, they weren't interested in the rest of the story. They were already upset that he basically said your disposition is a disposition that rejects the God you say you're already in covenant with.
anyway, I hear you on that. I'm going to have a guest on Friday. Not Dr., but Pastor Swanson has written a book about the white church.
Oh, David Swanson? I had him in this
Yeah,
several years ago.
yeah, we're going to
I
have him
blurbed
on.
that book, actually.
Yeah, we're going to have him. He's going to talk again about his book. And these topics, it seems like it's
Yeah.
perpetual.
Yeah.
We got to keep
I
thinking.
quote him in my book that just came out, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. I'll tell
Yeah.
him that. Or
Yeah.
maybe he
He
knows
knows.
it.
He knows. I told him.
Okay,
But
good. Well,
yeah.
then we're on good company. See,
Yeah. Yes.
I
It's a good
get
book.
good people here, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
If you look in the back, you'll see my name. I endorsed it. So,
okay, good.
yeah.
Oh, actually, I read it online, so I didn't get the
Okay.
book.
I
Actually,
can pull it out over here and show you, but
okay, I believe you. I
yeah.
believe you.
But no, I'm very glad he wrote that because it's a very needed book.
No, it's good. And it's not the whole thing, but it's the start, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important book that way. It gets people thinking on this, and that's where we got to go.
Right.
And
He wants to
I
change
hope this
he wants to redirect the conversation.
I hope this does some of that too, what we've done here today. And
Hope so.
I appreciate you being with me. I'm just going to do a few more quick little wrap up things and we'll wrap this little guy up.
And then I get to go back to grading.
You got to get back to grading. Yeah, I know. You got to get back to work.
Then I will go back.
I'm sorry about that. I got you away from that. Just real quick here. We're just going to this is the last moments here. About the VNA testing in Aurora, be sure to get your flu shot and your COVID-19 testing. They're both free. And the COVID testing, they want an appointment. So they're drive-throughs actually, I believe. And we want you to call. I'm going to put up the number if it comes up here. Come on now. So call 892-4355, 892-4355 for that, for get some testing going. I got a test the other day, doctor, and I was all right. It was because I was going to have another test that they wanted me to have the pre-test, so I was quarantined for 3 days here, but it was fine. And I guess my other test didn't do too bad either, so I'm happy about that. So we're going to have, I had previous on Monday, we had the Salvation Army. Here's how you can go out there and wherever you're at listening to this to register to do the bell ringing. This is a site that they have for that. That's a national site. So you can sign up for bell ringing. They told me they were down like 30% or something this year on that front, on their giving. So on Friday, we're going to have a special guest, David Swanson of Chicago, Covenant Church there I believe it's in Bronzeville. And he's going to be talking about how we can have some more engagement on these issues we've been talking about, racial and other matters of justice. So I think that'll be coming on Friday. So I just want to thank Dr. Vincent. Thank you so much for coming and being with me. I appreciate you. We'll hopefully get this word around. We would call this an extended interview.
Well, it kind of worked out that way every time. Next time,
it does. I remember last time it was about the same time too. So, hey, friends out there, just spread this around. We need these. We need to spread this around. So, I thank you very much for visiting with all of you here. So God bless right now, and bye-bye. We'll see you Friday. Bye-bye.